Welcome to Daily Meditation with Sangha Live.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Daily Meditation here at Sangha Live. It's dark here still. It'll get to be dawn as we're together. I do like being up at this time in the morning, although it isn't my normal habit. It does sometimes feel very early, particularly today. I had a rehearsal last night and it was a later one with an early morning. Always the night before it feels like, that's fine. Less so when the alarm goes off. Anyway, so I'm here this week to hold the space and to make space really for your practice and to offer some ideas along the way. And the ideas I've been sharing this week are all about meeting the world responsively, responding to the world rather than hiding away or reacting or becoming hopeless, I suppose. And the theme is how to respond to an unjust, burning world without losing your mind, and also without losing sight of the clear picture of the world. And in my world, I do some teaching like this, and I also work with charities and other groups who are kind of engaged in these struggles, whether they focus more on the humanitarian side, on what I yesterday was calling pulling people out of the river, or whether they focus more on the structural side and advocacy and systemic change, what I called stopping people falling in the river, or stopping people pushing people in the river. So that's where I'm coming from, and I really enjoy teaching on Sangha Live and being part of this community in a small way. And so, yes, I've put together this idea of 7 paths of responsiveness, or maybe 7 threads of responsiveness. I'm going to put them in the chat. So 4 of these we've already kind of gone through. We've got contemplate causes and conditions, or looking at history, where things have come from, guarding the sense doors, curating news and social media, making choices about that, nurturing your energy, which we'll talk about tomorrow actually, find the others and choose your line of action. That was yesterday. And today I'm going to talk about lowering your expectations and participating. Before I do that, let me mention Dana. If anyone would like to support by putting the Dana link in the chat, that would be wonderful. I don't have it handy. Just to mention that this platform runs on generosity. So the teachings are freely offered, and then there's a request to support if you're moved to, and if you would like to, and if you would like it all to continue, because I receive financial support from these weeks, and all the people who support Sangha Live to run, and Martin and all the other teachers receive support, and so it's very much appreciated if you're able to do that. And I'm really glad to see, thank you very much, Claire. Really glad to see you all here today, still, maybe if you've been coming along all week, because these things that I'm talking about, they're kind of not so easy. Maybe we need to have our practice as part of our support for engaging in the world in this way. I find that anyway. Yeah. Okie dokie. Oh, and the last thing I'll say, just in a kind of setup way, is that there's a Q&A function. So as well as the chat, you've got a Q&A button, and you're welcome to put questions or comments in there. It's kind of easier to find them in there than in the chat, which sometimes can move quite quickly. Okie dokes. So, coming first then to the thread of participation, it's about diving in and starting. There's that great Goethe quote about how action, it has a great power all of its own. Like whatever you want to do, whether that is, a poem or a song or meeting people or starting to contribute to changing the world, kind of just simply starting is an amazing creative force, creative act. And there's lots and lots of ways to do this. And next month on February 22nd, I'll be offering a day of practice kind of all about putting some of this into action. So there'll be practical ways to experiment within the session. I'm sort of seeing my role as being a slippery slope, hopefully in a happy way, a slippery slope from a sort of into greater participation, and also a slippery slope into greater kind of contemplative practice in the other direction. Anyway, on that day, I've got various games and activities planned, and one of them is going to be the $5 challenge. I could call it the £5 challenge, but I kind of like the ring of the $5 challenge. And I'm going to invite people to experiment by choosing a group or an organization that for them might be the others that they want to find or that they hope to find, and that might have chosen a line, like we talked about yesterday, that is meaningful, feels meaningful for them, and to give $5, to give a small donation, really the cost of like a coffee, or some of the cost of a drink these days in London, to give that donation and to then sit with the resonance of that and to see how that feels and to maybe discuss that a little bit as a Sangha. This act of giving resources, I think we talk about it quite a lot in terms of dharma, like I said at the top, for Sangha Live and for teachers, and what that's like, kind of interacting with that that set of discernments. But for this, it will be kind of giving to a different group. And I think giving money is a really undervalued way of contributing to systemic change, because all groups need money to function, whether or not they have paid staff. And it's not just money as well. When you receive money in that way, it's kind of like a vote of confidence. It's like an act of hope, an act of solidarity, because it can sometimes feel quite strange to be, going against the stream and organizing for these kinds of changes. People may be feeling quite dejected, and receiving that kind of real offer of support can be so wonderful. So that's one reason why even giving $5 or £1 can be more meaningful than you might expect. Another reason is that I found in my life it can be like the thin end of a wedge of further connection and engagement. It's a connection to those you wish to support or those you wish to be with. Because once you've given, maybe you're more curious about them, you have a kind of sense of connection, slowly start to learn more about them, signing up for information, turning up for a meeting, maybe turning up for a protest, getting more actively involved. It can be like the thin end of the wedge for that kind of thing. Mm. And like I said yesterday, this sense of finding the others, of being in solidarity, of taking collective action can be just a real kick, you know, a real joy. Building community and spending time in these kinds of collaborations. It's like Sangha, you know, finding the others who share values and practices, which I think is exactly what Sangha is in the meditation context, in the dharma context. Finding those with whom we wish to spend time, you know. So that's a little bit about participation, essentially diving in. And then the other thread I'd like to touch on is this theme of lowering expectations. And I don't know, maybe that sounds a little bit sad or unambitious. Maybe it's more right-sizing expectations, or maybe even right-sizing the range of your expectations. So, you know, you might want to overthrow capitalism, but you might also keep in mind that that will take some time. And in the meantime, there's lots of ways to build alternatives. As Joanna Macy says in her work, there's these kind of three ways to build. There's block, build, and be. Three ways to change the world. It's how she separates it. So block is sort of saying no, stopping things, disrupting systems, recreating them. Build is building alternatives. So I might want to overthrow capitalism, but in the meantime, while I'm doing that, I can also be starting a cooperative or making sure I'm supporting those who are otherwise outside that system. And then B is about the kind of personal self-education and community building and movement building and inner work, you know, as well. Anyway, getting off track. Just this idea that while we might hold a big and difficult goal in mind, we might acknowledge that that will take some time, and then there are other things we can do kind of along the way. And I think there's a danger sometimes to having very, very high expectations, maybe unrealistic expectations. And I have a story to illustrate that point, which some of you might be familiar with. So back in April in 2019, a van drove south into Oxford Circus. It was towing a large pink sailing boat, which had "Tell the Truth" painted on the side. The boat was detached and secured. The van sped off. And that was like a key moment in the Extinction Rebellion, International Rebellion. It was the first really big action from that group. And it lasted for several days. There were events all over the world, and groups sprang up in many, many countries, most countries. I was there for a good chunk of it, as I'm sure some of you were, wherever you were in the world. And Extinction Rebellion, which gets called XR as well, mobilized millions of people. And it had this really exciting promise, you know, that if you come out onto the streets, if you even put yourself at risk of arrest, the government will be forced to meet these demands. You know, these had three demands: tell the truth, act now, go beyond politics. Telling the truth was about declaring a climate emergency. Acting now, as opposed to just saying, oh, it's getting a bit warm, just to say, this is a problem, we need determined action. Then Act Now was about achieving net zero by 2025. Going beyond politics, which they've now reframed as Decide Together, was about creating citizens' assemblies and working kind of outside the established democratic processes. Relying on the common sense of ordinary people is how they framed it. And so millions mobilized. There were like over 1,000 regional and national XR groups, and it was an absolute phenomenon. And I think they were hugely successful. And I'm really kind of proud to have been a part of it in a tiny way. I just turned up. But I think they massively succeeded in terms of that first demand to tell the truth. You know, the narrative really changed, which is vital. Many governments, including the UK, many local authorities and other organisations have declared a climate emergency. However, there has been a massive tailing off of involvement, and there are so many reasons for this, which I could go on about at length. But I think one of the reasons might be that there was a kind of fizzy, high excitement about this very intense phase of action that might lead to massive change. Like if you just take 2 weeks off work and sit in a road, the government will massively change all of its policies. Within a few years, you know, within 7 or 8 years or less. And I think many new activists came in at that point. Many people got involved for the first time ever, maybe as part of this kind of wave of excitement. But then the lack of the scale of change that they were kind of effectively being encouraged to expect was very, very crushing. And I think may have inadvertently burned some people out or disappointed many who then have sort of withdrawn. And when we look at changes, like changes in the rights to vote, or the civil rights movement, disability rights movement, land access movements, they have tended to take many, many years. So I think it's useful to bear this in mind, you know, in terms of right-sizing expectations with regards to the time things might take, so that we don't, you know, inadvertently burn ourselves out or burn others out. That we're in it for the long haul and staying engaged even when there aren't kind of short-term wins. Staying alongside the uncomfortable feelings, keeping the hope in mind even as day to day we might feel impatience or a lot of challenge. You know, it's a really big paradox. It's like the Bodhisattva vows. You know, countless are living beings, I vow to row them all to the further shore. Countless are the poisons, I vow to purify them all. Dharma practice really, I think, trains us to be very fluent in paradox and perhaps comfortable with the discomfort of these apparent contradictions, which is one of the many reasons why I find Dharma practice so useful. There's a few other people who sort of talk in this, who talk about these paradoxes, you know, like the Bodhisattva vows. There's a thinker that I'm just having a real phase with called Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci in Italian. And he talked about pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. So pessimism of the intellect, we know things may be bad, and optimism of the will, we're going to build nonetheless. And an author called Rebecca Solnit, she wrote a book called Hope in the Dark, which is, you know, so a couple of decades old now, but it's excellent. And she says, among other things, hope is an embrace of the unknown. Again, very dharmic, sitting with uncertainty, knowing that we actually don't know what will happen, whether, you know, the story is everything's going to be okay or the story is everything's going to not be okay. We actually don't know. So we can sit in that maybe painful and uncomfortable uncertainty, but that also contains these seeds of potential. And a dear friend of mine called David G, who sadly died at the end of last year, actually on the winter solstice, he wrote, he collected stories of people engaging in these kinds of hope, and has a book called A Hope's Work, which asks how we might face our deeply disturbed times with a measure of conscious and careful hope. Anyway, so I just thought I'd suggest some resources, because a lot of people write about this and I find it really helpful and interesting. Like, how do we go towards this paradox with somehow right-sized ranges of expectation and at the same time very high, strong, warm hope? And maybe, this resonates for you. Maybe you've stayed alongside something, an issue for the long haul in whatever part of your life, things that didn't seem like they were going to change. Maybe you know someone who has. Maybe bring this person or this aspect of yourself to mind. Think or ask, if you like, what kind of resonance does that have for you in your heart? Bringing their work to mind, or their ideas, or their commitment, your own ideas and commitment, kind of the goodness of your practice, as Martin often says, the goodness of your practice, bringing it into your awareness and allowing it to resonate. So with these resonances, maybe let's settle in for some meditation. And I will put all these various links and things, certainly in Connect, which you can go to afterwards. And if I can, I'll put them in the chat as well, but I'll certainly put them in Connect. But let's settle to sit now, or in whichever form your body is going to be for meditation. Taking a minute to make any movements you like. Shaking, wriggles, stretching, yawning. Finding a way to settle in your body. Taking your awareness, your attention around your body. A brief tour to check in and see how things are, to see how things really are. And discerning if there are any changes you'd like to make, any interventions in this system of which you're a part. Is there a way to loosen a little or shift a little, finding that balance in your posture between solidity and rising, grounding and alertness, relaxed, open and awake. Coming into community with one another and with those whose commitment is an inspiration, those that we know, those that we don't know. Their steadfastness, how it mirrors our own commitment and steadfastness in whichever challenges we face or have faced, and in whichever joys we can embrace. To sit in steadiness, steady embodied presence, and in the knowledge of this great wide community of which we're a part. If you can hear the crows that I can hear, or maybe there are other sounds around you. From people or from other beings, allowing them to call you back into community, call you back into practice, call you back into steadiness, and commitment to building what you know is good, breath by breath, crow by crow. Thank you for your practice.
Today's podcast is an offering to you from our archive of freely available live daily classes. We make wisdom teachings and meditations as freely available as possible to as many people as wish to practice. You can help ensure we can continue to support a worldwide Sangha by leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts, by sharing this with someone who'd be interested, and by offering a small financial support at sangha.live/donate.